In 1897, a Pittsburgh steel worker earned 60 cents a day and burned 5,000 calories at the furnace. He did not eat well. He ate whatever kept him standing. And the meals that kept him standing have been completely erased from American memory. Today, we are counting down 25 forgotten meals that fueled the machines, the minds, and the men who built modern America. Watch till the end, because the truth about what those workers carried in their lunch pails will change how you think about American labor forever. Number 25, dripping bread. Before the sun came up over the coal towns of Pennsylvania, before the shift whistle blew, someone in a tenement kitchen was spreading beef fat on dark bread. Dripping bread, the rendered fat left in the pan after meat was cooked, cost almost nothing. It was eaten standing up in the dark by men who needed calories more than they needed flavor. The real genius was in the fat itself, dense, slow-burning energy for bodies that had no margin for hunger. We lost something when the company canteen arrived and called this kind of meal embarrassing. Number 24. Miners, pasty Cornish immigrants brought it to the copper mines of Michigan and the coal seams of Pennsylvania. A dense pastry of potato, turnip, and salted meat, crimped with a thick rope of crust. And get this, the crimp was not meant to be eaten. Miners' hands were coated in arsenic and coal dust, so they held the pasty by the crust and threw the handle away when they were done. Your great-grandfather did not eat at a table. He ate crouched in a tunnel, 300 feet below the earth in the dark. Number 23, salt pork and beans. In the boarding houses of Lowell and Lawrence, Massachusetts, textile mill workers, most of them young women, ate salt pork and beans every single morning. The pot went on the iron stove the night before and cooked while everyone slept. By 5 in the morning it was ready. It was not a choice. It was the meal the boarding house served and the meal the workers ate 6 days a week for years. Translation: this was industrial nutrition, engineered for output, not for the person eating it. Number 22, Mulligan stew. Along the railroad lines being driven across the American interior, gangs of transient laborers, Irish, Chinese, Italian, black, pooled whatever they had into a single iron pot. Bones, turnips, stale bread, grease, a handful of dried peas. Mulligan stew was a communal act disguised as a meal. No two pots were the same. No recipe existed. It was whatever 12 men had between them at the end of a 16-hour day of lane track. But here is where it gets truly poignant. Every man ate every time because the pot belonged to everyone. Number 21, cornmeal mush. Eaten morning and night in southern mill towns and northern tenements alike. Cornmeal mush was cooked in bulk, eaten hot from a pot at dinner, then poured into a pan and left to set overnight. The next morning it was sliced cold and fried in lard. The same batch fed a family twice. The real genius was in the economics. A 10-cent sack of cornmeal could stretch across 3 days for a family of 5. It faded quietly when packaged cereals arrived in the 1910s and convinced working families that convenience meant progress. Number 20, iron kettle soup. Some called it perpetual soup. Some called it the forever pot. In Milltown boarding houses from Pittsburgh to Chicago, a pot of soup was kept on the back of the stove and never fully emptied. Scraps were added daily: a ham bone, potato peels, wilted cabbage, cooking water. The broth deepened over weeks. It sounds almost poetic until you understand what it meant. The family could not afford to start a fresh pot. The kettle was never empty because emptying it meant there was nothing left at all. Number 19, hardtack and molasses carried in coke. Pockets by canal diggers and railroad laborers on long projects far from any town. Hardtack was a dense cracker of flour, water, and salt that lasted for weeks without spoiling. Dipped in molasses, cheap, thick, and full of iron, it became a field ration for the industrial age. The molasses delivered sugar energy fast. The hardtack delivered it slow. Your great-grandfather understood nutrition science intuitively without a single word of formal education, because his body told him what it needed to make it to sundown. Number 18, buckwheat pancakes. In the iron-working communities of Pennsylvania Dutch country, buckwheat pancakes were made the night before, fermented slightly with a spoonful of sourdough starter, and fried on a cast iron griddle at 4 in the morning. They were dense, dark, and high in calories. designed to carry a man through a 12-hour shift at the forge. The batter sat on the back of the stove overnight, a quiet promise of morning. We lost something when white flour pancakes replaced them. We lost a food that was actually built for work. Number 17, fried salt cod. In the mill towns of New England, particularly among Portuguese and Irish immigrant workers, salt cod was fried in a skillet with onion and whatever fat was available. It was cheap because it was preserved, dried, and salted before it ever reached the market. And it lasted without refrigeration in a tenement with no icebox. A single piece of salt cod stretched with onion and fried hard could feed 2 people. It disappeared from working class tables in the 1920s when canned fish became affordable and salt cod began to seem like poverty. Number 16, pea soup with ham hock. A single ham hock, simmered in a pot of dried peas with an onion and a pinch of salt, could be stretched across an entire week in a Chicago or Pittsburgh tenement. The hock was boiled on Monday, the rich broth ladled out Tuesday, the stripped bone added back Wednesday. By Friday, the pot was mostly water and memory. And get this, the family eating it did not consider themselves to be starving. They considered themselves to be managing. That quiet dignity, feeding 5 people on 40 cents, is exactly what has been forgotten. Pattern break? Here is where things get personal. The meals on this list were not food choices. They were survival decisions made by people who had no choices. Because here is a truth that American history has quietly buried. The industrialists who built this country's wealth made sure their workers could not afford to eat well. The company store, which paid wages in scrip redeemable only at company-owned shops, ensured that a worker's 60 cents a day went directly back to the man who paid it. These meals were not the result of ignorance or tradition. They were the result of a system designed to extract maximum labor at minimum cost. The men and women who ate dripping breads and perpetual soup were not simple people. They were intelligent, resourceful people trapped inside an economy that had no interest in their dignity. If this history moves you, hit the subscribe button. There is so much more that has been forgotten. Number 15, cracker hash. New England shoe factory workers, seated at machines 10 hours a day, kept crushed hardtack crackers in their apron pockets and mixed them at noon with whatever cold fat they had brought from home. Salt pork drippings, lard, occasionally a spoonful of bacon grease. The mixture was pressed into a cake and eaten cold or fried quickly over a small stove. It was not a meal anyone chose when they had options, but here is where it gets truly insightful. It was exactly as caloric as a modern energy bar, and it cost almost nothing. Number 14, bone broth bread. In the 1880s, tenement bakers in New York and Chicago discovered that bread dough, mixed with the liquid left from boiling bones, rich in gelatin and minerals, rose differently and tasted fuller than bread made with water alone. It was not a recipe from a cookbook. It was an invention born of necessity in a kitchen that had nothing to waste. The bones had already given their meat. Now they gave their water. The real genius was that the bread that resulted actually nourished more than ordinary bread did. We rediscovered this logic a century later and called it bone broth. Number 13, sweetened lard sandwiches. This one is the hardest entry on the list. In the textile mills of the American South and the coal sorting rooms of Pennsylvania, children as young as 8 years old worked 10-hour days. They carried lunch in a cloth tied at the corners, 2 slices of dark bread spread with lard mixed with a spoonful of molasses or brown sugar. It was dense enough to keep a small body working. It was sweet enough to feel like something more than survival. Your great-grandmother may have carried one of these to work as a child, wrapped in yesterday's newspaper before anyone decided her childhood was worth protecting. Number 12, buckwheat groat porridge. Eastern European immigrants, Poles, Ukrainians, Slovaks, who flooded into the steel towns of Pittsburgh and Gary, Indiana after 1900 brought buckwheat groat porridge with them. Cooked with water and a lump of lard, it was dense, feeling, and familiar in a country where nothing else was. Workers ate it from tin bowls at 4 a.m. before walking to the mill. The taste of it, one immigrant wrote in a letter home in 1907, was the only thing in America that still tasted like home. Pattern break, a question for you. Did your grandparents or great-grandparents ever tell you about meals from this era? A dish that seems strange or humble or not worth mentioning, drop it in the comments below, because the real archive of industrial America is not in any museum. It is in the kitchens of the people watching this right now. And those stories are disappearing faster than any recipe ever could. Number 11, railroad coffee. It was not really coffee. It was burnt grain, barley, rye, chicory root, ground coarse and boiled in a tin pail over an open fire at the side of a rail line somewhere in Nebraska or Wyoming. Occasionally there was one actual coffee bean in the entire pot. It was hot. It was bitter. It was the signal that the workday was beginning or that it was mercifully done. Your great-grandfather drank it without complaint because warmth and bitterness were two things he could always count on. The rest of his day offered neither. 25 meals. 25 windows into the America that built everything we live inside of today, and was never thanked for it. These men and women were not eating poorly because they did not know better. They were eating what an entire economic system had decided they deserved, and they fed their families anyway with an ingenuity no cookbook has ever honored. We lost something when these meals disappeared. We lost the memory of what it truly cost to build this country. Hit subscribe for more lost American memories and forgotten wisdom.